we're on a new system here, so it's a little bit of an experiment. Welcome back. We're doing the part two of the Surah 7 discussion, only because Surah 7 is so stupidly long that we didn't get to all of it last time. So there was a number of things that my panel deemed important that they wanted to cover on this. So we looked like we were missing maybe a couple of people. I know I got notice from Rada that she will not be. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That she will not be able to make it. Last minute thing came up. She was very enthusiastic for the rest of the week, but at the last minute she's like, "Drat, something else." And I don't know if Mohsen is going to make it, but I'll keep my eye out, and if he shows up, I'll tag him in. All right, so welcome back, Nadir and Bogi. Bogi, do you have notes on where we left off?
Oh yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead and pick it up, and I'll see if I can get on the chart with you.
Okay, so I think we stopped at 738, which talks about putting the jinn in hellfire, and that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense because the jinn are made of fire, so it wouldn't be a punishment for them.
I'm kind of curious as to what is this structure that Islam has, where I mean, obviously in the Christian side these would be angels, but for whatever reason, in the Muslim side, they're essentially devils or genies, one or the other or both. And why would genies be going to hell?
Yeah, the epistemological difference between angels and genies.
Well, just to kind of answer the first objection, if they were made out of fire, they're made out of a different type of fire. It's called a smokeless fire. So it's not like the fire which you and I understand. So this is. So this you guys. Okay, listen. Let's back up here. I mean, we gotta be somewhat, objective of this. I mean, I think there's an issue of being closed-minded here, which I think we saw on the show last time, where I tried to explain who Adam was, and it wasn't even 30 seconds that I had 3 people jumping on me with objections. That's ridiculous, Boraz. You got to listen to a person. You got to understand that in religion, it doesn't matter which religion it is, whether it's Islam or Christianity, there's the concept of a creator. He can create and do whatever he wishes. Now, what I want to reassure Aron and Boraz is there, from the last couple of shows, there was this insistent kind of hammering of you guys are believing in mythology, legends, and fairy tales, and it's like you wanted to hammer this concern in us. One thing I want to rest assure you guys, we also have the same concern. It's not just atheists. I mean, now there are other religions that don't, like, for example, in Hinduism, not a very deep concern about these things. But when you talk about the Muslims, we are just as concerned about believing in myths and legends as you are. So let's try to have an open mind.
So what's the problem of making jinns out of pink fire and angels of green fire?
If you want to be funny, that actually wasn't a funny joke. But anyways,
it is funny actually, because
this
you're now creating a fire out of nothing to explain something that's obviously incorrect.
Just for grins, does the Quran actually say that it's smokeless fire?
Smokeless fire, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So part of the fallacy of something called ad ridiculum is that you try to show that the other person's point of view is so ridiculous, it's not worth considering. So I see this as a kind of a logical fallacy. I think there is an issue where you guys need to grasp the concept of something called a miracle. God can create, he can interject into his creation and do something which could break and violate the laws of nature, and that's what the definition of what a miracle is. So I don't see this as being something which proves or disproves Islam, but if this was a competition of just laughing at your belief, then for sure you could laugh and mock any belief system.
Okay, well, you notice that's not what I'm doing.
Well,
now we have 2 different perspectives on this. If something is impossible, that's my criteria to determine that it didn't happen. Like the worldwide flood, we know several different reasons that is absolutely impossible. That's what proves that it didn't happen. And when you happen across something that is impossible, that is your declaration to say that we don't know if it happened because God is magical, can do anything he wants. That's a wonderful excuse, but it does not work.
Well, actually, well, first of all, let's get to the worldwide flood. An actual worldwide flood. A lot of atheists I talk to actually do recognize that Islam has a better position on this. In fact, I was inside the comments discussion of one of our video. I mentioned this. I said, listen, if you look at chapter 25, verse 74 of the Quran actually negates the worldwide flood. It actually talks about a local flood. So all of those issues with history, archaeology, and science, which contradicts the worldwide flood, that problem we don't have that in Islam. And I'm looking kind of to you, Aaron, to at least say, okay, well, Islam has a good point on this one. Okay, it did correct this issue.
Okay. You've got a point. In this very surah, it contradicts you. It says that let me see if I can find it in here, where you become the heirs, where somehow the Arabs have become the heir of Noah, or does this talk about everybody has become the heirs? Remember how he made you heirs after Noah's people and increased your stature. Remember God's bounty so that you may prosper. So he doesn't seem to be specifying any one particular Iraqi group. He's talking to Saudis at this time, who are supposed to be heirs of Noah, meaning, and this is the implication, that we are all heirs of Noah. But we know that even if there was a local flood, and we know that the story was based on a local flood. I mean, originally all of these details can be extracted back to this like one flood of Shurapak and Kish, right? And so this is the one that the archaeologists can back up, and this is where we have common elements for all these different stories seem to be relating to this one event. We know that guy was not Muslim. That guy was not following the God of Judea, the Abrahamic God. It is a completely different pantheon. So it doesn't make any difference. The actual truth to the Noah's Ark story is that it was a regional flood, a localized flood in one area. It didn't have anything to do with the God of Islam. That was added on later. There's absolutely no truth to any part of this. And at some point, you're going to have to grasp that, there's no truth to this. That's important.
Yeah, we talked about this also in the last show. So I think what you're doing, you're trying to show, okay, well, the story of the flood account we find this actually in many literatures outside of the Bible, which predate, I think, some of the biblical literature. And as I pointed out, that doesn't disprove Islam. You cannot that might be called the problem with Christianity, because now they have to answer for that, but not for us, because chapter 16, verse 16 verse 36, okay, in the Quran, it explains that a messenger was sent to every nation of people on earth. So that means every group of people, whether Chinese, whatever they are, they all had a messenger sent to them. So a lot of that message, which they came down with, has been fragmented, and you can find it now in the different books. And of course, it's probably been changed and altered and
why is there no
editorialized and stuff like that.
So you bring this up every time we speak.
Yes.
And I have to wonder every time you do, why did you bring that up when it's obviously irrelevant and stands against his point? So we don't have any commonality between the Mesopotamian origins of what you're talking about and Chinese tradition or Egyptian or North American or European or whatever. There's no common bond in any of these. So why do you keep bringing it up?
I'm trying to show you that by showing that the story pre-existed in other sources doesn't prove or disprove anything. I just want to specify, I'm not saying that it proves or disproves anything. I said there was no truth to it. So there's no way you could prove or disprove that. This is your faith proclamation.
Yes. We know that the flood never happened. We know that the origins of it had nothing to do with Islam or the God of Abraham. So
how can you prove this? Please, how do you prove or disprove whether a local flood never happened? How do you prove or disprove something like that?
I didn't say that we disproved the local flood never happened. I said that the kernel of truth in that is that there was a local flood, but it didn't have anything to do with the God of Abraham. Ziusudra was not Muslim, nor was he in any sense Abrahamic. At that point, the religion of Judaism was the only Abrahamic religion that existed, and it was still polytheistic at best. So they hadn't become a monotheistic religion by that point.
Well, what we believe is that the prophetic tradition also resides outside of the Abrahamic strain, the lineage of the Israelites. So, as I mentioned, prophets were sent to everybody. So that message of God's message, you are going to find it in many different books.
Except
And so
that
it
we
really all
don't.
comes
That
down
was the
to,
point. That was the point I was making. We don't find it in any other books. That's the problem. So God sends messengers who are absolutely incapable of sending his message, so that there is no hint of God's message, it coming from Europe, coming from Egypt, coming from China, coming from the Americas, coming from Australia. It doesn't exist. So the story, and that's all it is, the story makes an empty assertion of a thing that is not in evidence. Okay, it expresses that all these prophets have come down to deliver these messages all over the world. No hint of any message, no common bond at all, anywhere, period. That's it. That's all. So what you've got is just the Abrahamic traditions within a 100 square mile circle, and that's it. Or I don't know, I think 500 square mile circle. Everything that occurs in the Bible, the Quran, everything is all in this one tiny little circle. It involves nothing of the rest of the world. That's the problem with Surah 16.
what I would agree with you is when the Quran makes a claim about something specific, you are not going to find evidence which will prove everything in the book. But at the same time, you will also never find any proof which can disprove anything in the Quran.
My point was that you can never find anything that will prove anything in the Quran. Nothing. That's why I said there's no truth to it. And this is true of all religions. It isn't just with Islam. There is not one religion. All the religions make a bunch of empty promises. They all express things that they want to assert without any evidence at all. But there is none of them that can show the truth of their claim. There is none of them that can show that their religion is any more accurate than any other. None of them can show that there's even a there, that there is any substance whatsoever to their belief. None of them can demonstrate there's any kind of supernatural. None of them can demonstrate that faith healing actually works. None of them can demonstrate that a miracle is anything other than an excuse for things that they can't understand. There's absolutely no truth to any religion, and your religion is no different. That's it. That's all I was saying. I don't have to disprove your religion.
Here's where we can agree and disagree on. We agree that first of all, majority of the religions are based on mythology. They're based on tales being told from one generation to the next. And by the people who actually follow those religions, they will probably agree. For example, in the Hindu religion, they have a belief in a god called Hanumanji. Hanumanji is a monkey god. Now, do Hindus really affirm that this Hanumanji really existed? Majority, at least from my personal experience, will open up the possibility this could be tales and mythology, which has just been handed down from generation to generation.
And if you didn't worship the god Hanuman, you'd be in big trouble, by the way.
No, well, the thing I wanted to bring up about Hanuman is, and this is the weird thing about the way religions appropriate things. Mm-hmm. There is there's a line of elevated stone that connects India to Sri Lanka, and this is called Hanuman's Bridge, and you can see it in satellite photos. But I mean, the local people talk about this story about how Hanuman was ordered by Vishnu, I believe it was, to bring out all his monkey army and with all these rocks, and they were going to pile up all these rocks in the ocean to build a bridge to Sri Lanka. And that, then they say that the water levels rose, and that when the water level rose, that the bridge was obscured. And there seems to be some truth to that, because if the water level was lower, like in another ice age, you actually would have a hairline bridge going to Sri Lanka. At least that's what it looks like in the satellite photographs. So the Indians call that Hanuman's Bridge, and then the Muslims came along and appropriated it, and now they call it Adam's Bridge. They just changed the mythology for it. Mm-hmm. And you talk about that every religion blames other religions for believing in mythology. Look at your own. You've adopted somebody else's myth and stamped your own name on it. But it's the Muslims that did that changed Hanuman's Bridge to Adam's Bridge.
I don't see that. I don't see that inside our religion. But what I want you.
But you probably should. You probably should, because it is there.
Okay. Well, you'll have to show that to me. But what I wanted, just going back to your original point about, Islam. You mentioned Islam is just like all these other religions, and this is where you're wrong. Islam does bring evidence from science showing that this is not a myth. There is that Islam rests upon three claims. which brings forth real evidence. Number one, there's no scientific errors in the Quran, unlike the Bible and other books. Number one. Number two, the Quran actually corrects the scientific errors, as we saw with Noah's flood. That's just one example in the prior scriptures, proving that, hey, wait a second, this God seems to know about these things. And the third fact, which the evidence which we look at for the science, that for Islam, that Islam has evidence in there are statements in the Quran which modern scientists have only discovered recently, yet they were mentioned in the book 1400 years ago. Now, you have not given me the opportunity to present that evidence for you. Once you do, then I would ask for you to I would ask for you to withhold judgment till you hear and see our proofs.
Okay, I've heard from a number of other apologists. I have an idea what's coming. You're not going to present any evidence, and you're not going to be able to, and you're not going to be able to deny, although you will definitely try. You're not going to be able to deny the list of scientific errors that I've found, not just that other people have found, but that I myself have found in the Quran. There definitely are scientific errors in the Quran. They do not correct the scientific errors in the Bible. As a matter of fact, you add your own errors that weren't already in there.
Okay.
Islam actually adds errors that were not in the Bible already.
Okay, well, what do you call?
We will get to that.
Let's do that. Let's do that discussion. Do you want to show me one scientific error?
Discussion. As we said on the air last week, we said that we were going to come back and do Surah 7 Part 2. And that's what we're doing right now. And then once we finish with Surah 7 Part 2, we will begin the series of scientific errors in the Quran. I'm anxious to do this. I want to do that today. Sure. So as soon as we get done with Surah 7, we will dive into that. And we will begin listing the scientific errors. What?
You need to correct yourself on one thing. You're making these absolute claims, which you cannot do anymore, because I just showed you Noah's flood was corrected. The Bible taught of a worldwide flood, which, as you pointed out,
Surah 7, the one we're talking about right now, names everybody as an heir of Noah. So it contradicts you. Well, I have corrected you, and so you should take correction and your own advice there.
Hold on a second. Let's first deal with the worldwide flood. Then we talk about the hears thing, because I might have misunderstood you on that, and I apologize. But you see, you can no longer say this, that there's absolutely no correction in the Quran. No, you can't say that anymore, because an element of truth.
When did you show me a correction?
The worldwide flood, chapter 25,
and
verse 24.
And Surah 7, the one we're talking about right now, that says that everybody is an heir of Noah, contradicts you.
That's a different issue.
So you did not correct me, sir. I corrected you.
But the issue about hears and flood, these are two different issues. You could probably argue this. Okay, you might have got it right on Noah's flood to a certain extent, but now you're wrong over here on this other issue.
Okay,
I think
well, if you show me to be wrong, I've been wrong before. Yes. I never learn so much as when I find out that I'm wrong about something. So if you can show me that I'm wrong, I will try to be as courteous as possible, even if it's embarrassing. Yes. I will accept correction. Being a person of faith, I doubt you have that same ability.
Well, where I think you're wrong is you're being presumptuous about Islam. In the sense, like, you have a lot of experience in debating Christians, but when you come to Islam, it's a very different ballgame. In many respects, there's a lot of similarities, but what I find as far as the errors, you're basically basing your experience on what you've found and discussed in the other religions on Islam. If you read the comments section, when I've had a lot of discussions with the people who watch the video, a lot of the atheists do agree on certain things, which I say not 100%, but there is points of agreement. And I think that if you come in here with this understanding, okay, this Islam is just as wacky quacky as all those other religions, you're going to be wrong. There are issues of agreement. We can agree on Noah's flood as far as it being localized versus a general worldwide flood. There's certain levels of agreement. We can agree on that.
Well, we know that the flood began, or the story came from what was originally a localized flood. There absolutely was not a global flood, but the Jewish tradition wrote it as a global flood, as did their predecessors. Also, the Epic of Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh both describe a global flood, right? So, or at least they make it out to be. By the time you get to Hexus, I can't remember what his name was. You have two revisions done many centuries later. Hexus, I can't remember his name, but anyway, there was two revisions done like 1,000 years later. One of them was this Hexos character, and then the other one is Noah. And they're very parallel, but adapted to new religions. So now you have the tradition being that there's supposed to be a worldwide flood, and this is what ends up in the Jewish Bible, which of course the Christians believe the Jewish Bible, so they're still calling it a worldwide flood. So of course Islam assumes it to be a worldwide flood. So when they write it in the Quran, they assume that everybody is descended from Noah. That's why Surah 7 says that we are heirs of Noah.
Do you know why it says so? Do you
Okay,
know
what verse are you? Which verse are you talking about? What verse? 7.
It was. I'm looking for the number. 59, I think. I didn't number this verse. I believe it's 59.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
so now I understand what you're saying, that
either you can go the route of metaphorically heirs of Noah, as in the message of Noah is now betrothed upon you, right? And you're not really related to Noah because practically nobody else died on that flood. And everybody just continued living. And now we are the heirs of the message of Noah. Okay, you can go that route, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you are going to actually make the statement and stand by it, that everybody is the heirs of Noah, that means Noah's family is the only one surviving the flood. Everyone else is dead by drowning, okay? Yeah. And only the animals that survived with Noah on the ark have managed to reproduce and evolve into different kinds of animals. Problems with penguins and stuff like that.
Well, let's first get the verse in front of us, just so I can take a look at it. Did you find that by any chance?
It was 59 to 64. I didn't put the entire story. I only quoted that one line.
Okay, let me see. Let me get it in front of me here before I can comment on it.
The line was, remember how he made you heirs after Noah's people and increased your stature. Remember God's bounty so that you may prosper. And my response to that was, remember how none of that happened.
Okay, I'm looking through the verse right now. I'm looking for your point. I convey to you the message of my Lord and advise you, and I know, and so I don't see it in here.
It should be 50. I mentioned verses 59 to 64.
Yeah, but denied him, and we drowned him, and we drowned those. Yes, and this also once again talks about a local flood. It said, but they denied him. We saved him and those who were with him in the ship, and we drowned those who denied our signs.
How many people were on the ship?
I don't know.
That's the cardinal question.
I'll grant that it doesn't specify in any other sense. Other than assuming that Saudis are descended from Noah, it doesn't. So far as I've seen, it doesn't specify as the Bible
and
does.
The other thing that in Islamic theology, Noah is a second Adam.
Well, and that's not what the Quran teaches. Okay, so by the way,
you can go there, but there are two progenitors to humanity according to the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is Adam, and the second one is Noah.
Okay, so I looked through the passages, and I don't see anything which says that you are somehow the progeny or in the sense of progeny of Noah, and that's not taught in the Quran.
Okay, well, I'm going off of Abdel Halim's translation.
Okay, and that's fine.
I can look through another translation if you prefer.
Well, no, you guys. I looked through. Well, I don't see anything. You mentioned a couple of verses, but I went through 59. I don't see anything in there. I went through 60. Didn't see anything in there. So I'm not
64.
59 to 64.
Look at 64.
That's what I just read for you. It says, but they denied him. So we saved him and those who were with him in the ship, we drowned those who denied our sign. So this is again another reference, yet again, of where it shows that only those people who denied were killed.
Okay, so how many people were with Noah on the ship?
I'm sorry. I know the Quran doesn't say how many people were with Noah. So we don't know.
Doesn't say it here, does it?
No, but we do know that actually in the Hadith, it talked about very few people believed in Noah, very few. And it's like, and we're only talking not even a handful of people who actually believed in Noah, in the Prophet Noah. So this is a very small amount of people. But as far as what we're not going to find in Islam, that we are all the progeny of Noah, him being like a second Adam, this is all conjecture. Well, actually, the Quran denies something like that. Inside chapter 7, verse 64, it says those people who denied. So this is something which we see is this is something which really needs to be answered here. How is it that what we do know is that, well, let me back up. If Muhammad was not a true prophet, then that means he is copying from the Bible. So the question is, if he's copying from the Bible or some other source, how is it and why is he correcting the story to make it scientifically correct, which is what chapter 7, verse 64 actually does?
He doesn't.
We drowned them who denied our science. Is a correction to the worldwide flood.
Right. And yet again, it wasn't anybody being drowned because of their religious beliefs. It was an entire town that was being drowned.
Let me cross-reference you a little bit here.
Yeah.
Okay?
I'm trying to understand your point.
26:105 كذبت قوم نوح للمرسلين. That's kind of
denied the messengers.
That's kind of given, exactly. Okay, so 36:41 وإنا حملناهم ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون.
We carried them on the ship.
Who did we carry on the ship?
Yeah, then again, in the family of Imran.
The word Dhurriya means offspring.
Dhurriya.
So it's only Noah and his family.
And then Surah 3, Surah 3:33 also says that God chose Adam, Noah, Abraham's family, and the family of Imran over all people in the line of descent. So there again, everybody is descended from Abraham, everybody's descended from Noah, everybody's descended from Adam.
No, that's your you're jumping to conclusions from that. That's
all right.
not
what does that mean when it says it chose Adam, Noah, Abraham's family, and the family of Imran?
Well, this is something about prophethood, that we've chosen them for the message versus other people. But let me get back to the verse which you quoted, that you do have to understand that I believe Noah's wife and his son were not saved. So you can't say his whole family was saved. No, they drowned. In fact, Noah witnessed his son drowning.
Then you have a problem with the word Dhurriya in the Quran.
The line I was looking for, by the way, is 769. I thought it was 64. My apologies.
So here's what I think this is what's not going to happen. I think you're trying to prove a worldwide flood from the Quran, in spite of the fact it just told you 2 to 3 times in the text this is a local flood, and this is not going to happen. I think if you want to prove an error with science, I would ask that you choose something else. This is just not going to work.
Okay. It's already worked, but that's okay. As I said, I was willing to concede that it doesn't specify, it doesn't say the words worldwide flood. It doesn't express that the way the Bible does. But there are implications in multiple surahs that everybody is descended from Noah as they are from Adam.
That's what we call an Israeli.
What is your translation of verse 69?
Verse 69, 769?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let me first address what you just said. That you said it's in a worldwide flood is implied from other texts. Is that what you're saying there?
Well, like we said, Muhammad is copying these stories from people who copied stories from people who copied stories, and that's why the implication is that everybody is descended from Noah.
Well, if you start with that presupposition, then this is a fallacy.
Not a presupposition. A presupposition is something you presuppose before you investigate or study it.
You presuppose this is a copy job.
What?
You presuppose.
I do not presuppose it was a copy job. This was something that I had to deduce after investigation, so it is not a presupposition. A conclusion reached after investigation is not a presupposition.
Okay, well, there's no way
before and without investigating.
The wild claims you're making against the Quran.
I'm not making any wild claims. I'm making well-substantiated claims. Now, what
Okay.
is your
I'm sorry.
translation of verse 69?
Well, let me go back to your original point that somehow you were able to prove that the author of the Quran copied from other sources. I mean, you proved this, right? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
I didn't say that I proved it. I don't have to prove it. This is the only probable scenario. This is the only thing the evidence indicates.
Now, when you say this, well, like if I were to go into like a university and let's say we, with a religious studies classroom, is this really what they're going to teach as a
Well, in a
fact? That the
religious
Quran was a
studies
copy job?
class, there's no telling what they might teach in a religious studies class. But if you're studying archaeology, for example, then yeah, they're going to say that the story of Noah and the story of Hyksos, or however you pronounce his name, these both have common roots in the epics of Atrahasis and of Gilgamesh, and both of them tie back to Ziusudra in the Sumerian king list as
Sure.
having this particular flood, and all of these stories, with releasing the birds and the olive branch and all of these other elements. These are all coming from earlier stories, and the thing that is unique to the latter story, the one of Noah, is for the first time we have the integration of a completely new God. Every other earlier version, and some of these versions are 1,000 years older than the event itself was like 2,000 years old earlier. None of them had anything to do with your God, and so that was added 1,000 years after the fact, around 450 something BC, if I remember correctly. So that's when the Noah story comes up and being as worldwide and attributed to the Abrahamic God.
Well, what I think is this is what we call something called an Israeliyat. Now, what an Israeliyat is, where people will read the Quran and they say, okay, well, I think though it's not specifically explicitly stated, it's implied. So those implications which people walk away with on the Quran, they borrow that from the Judeo-Christian sources. And so actually you will actually find a lot of Muslims who do believe in a worldwide flood, but that's only because they started interpreting the Quran based on Judeo-Christian traditions. But they didn't read the text carefully, as you and I have done inside chapter 7, verse 69, I believe, or 64, as well as 25, verse 74.
Do you have any percentages on that?
What percentage? Oh, I would say majority.
A majority of Muslims believe that the flood was universal.
Because the majority of the world, if you look at the Islamic world, you will find a lot of Judeo-Christian traditions absorbed and believed by the Muslims because they interacted with them. But
just a second, and reading the Quran has had absolutely zero effect on that.
Right. In fact,
even though it is crystal clear, like the headlights with the deer, and still the majority of Muslims think that the flood, and they are all wrong. And guess what? They'll probably go to hell for it.
No, they're not going to go to hell for it. But this is just one example. In the Islamic world, you will find many examples of Judeo-Christian traditions, which is believed and followed by Muslims, but yet the origins do not root into scripture. It goes into the Judeo-Christian tradition. There's many examples like this, but not only just Hinduism, not only just the Bible, but also Hindu traditions. You go to India today, you will find many traditions which are not in Islam, but they're from the Eastern culture, like removing your shoes to go into the mosque. Now, you'll go to every mosque and you'll see you have to do that. But is it really something taught in the Quran? Is it really something which in the Hadith which says you have to do this? No, it's not. It's a tradition that people follow. Prayer carpets is another example. There's hundreds I can give you, actually. Noah's flood is just one. So you have to understand evolution, how people understanding evolve.
There's another example of that in this very surah.
I'm sorry, what's that?
There's another example of that in this very surah.
Of religious borrowing.
Yes.
Well, I keep
making the mistake of the original error being repeated.
Okay, are you talking about chapter 7, verse 69?
No, although we'd still like to hear your translation of that.
Okay, so well, first of all, as I pointed out, there are a lot of things you're going to find in Islam which will actually taught inside, or you'll find the similarities in like previous scriptures, whether it's Islam Judaism, Christianity. You'll also find it affirming things from outside of those books. But as I pointed out to you, chapter 16, verse 36 makes it very clear that this its explanation for why you'll find the similarities. And that is messengers and traditions were sent to all nations of people, not just the Israelite lineage. So that message originated with them, got fragmented and put in other books. And because of that, you will find many similarities in the different religions. So that proves and disproves nothing. The only is, do you believe the Quran's explanation for why it's there, or do you just want to make the assumption that this was a case of religious borrowing? But because Islam does present irrefutable evidence that it's correcting the scientific errors of the Bible, that was just one example, though no other one doesn't prove it 100%.
I would bet, without even having heard it, I would almost guarantee that I can refute what you're claiming to be irrefutable. Matter of fact, I will come out and say that, because I know that no religion has evidence, period. So that means that your whatever you want to claim as evidence has already been refuted. So you don't have irrefutable evidence, but that is the next episode after we get out of Surah 7. Now, as far as another example of things being borrowed on the wrong traditions, we know that originally there was a story that people would tell their children, when they're looking at the stars, or they would read all these stories into astronomy. The movements of the planets and everything. They had all these tales that were connected to that, and one of them was the morning star, which is Venus. It's always low in the sky and everything, and never rises to the level of the moon, and is always conquered by the dawn. So we end up with a story. The myth being that you have two twin brothers, Shahar and Shalim. These are the dawn and the dusk. Now, the way that I read the story the first time, I didn't realize that they were actually talking about actual dawn or actual dusk. I thought they were twins, and they were named Shahar and Shalim, right? So they have their son, or one of their son is Hillel ben Shahar, right? And so he's the son of the dawn. And the dawn and the dusk are both sons of El, and El is both the son and God, and all of this. Anyway, the story originally is that, how are you fallen from heaven, O Hillel ben Shahar, right? Because the Venus disappears at some point in the dawn and can never rise to the elevation of the moon. So this is where you get the idea, or where Christians get the idea of the fallen angel, Lucifer, the light bringer, the morning star, Venus. So they get this error. They create, if they're out of their mythology, they create an actual devil, which doesn't make any sense in the story for a number of reasons. They include a lot of things that don't make any sense, but they run with it and never notice the error. And then Islam comes along in this very surah and repeats that same error, talking about this devil character.
See, you've presented to us a plausible theory on how this story, or how the origins of the story of the devil is found. But again, I think we're getting to the point where these are things which you cannot prove or disprove at all.
I don't have to prove them. Because I'm not the one claiming irrefutable evidence. The person who makes that claim has to prove it. And
I'm ready. Anytime you're ready. But let me ask you a question.
When we're ready, we'll be done with this surah.
I have a question for you. So I claimed irrefutable evidence, and that the Quran has information in it which scientists have only discovered today. But what if I were to do this to you? When you ask me for that evidence, it's not actually in the text, but it's something I'm saying, well, it's implied. It's actually, it looks like it's implied there, but it's not specifically stated. Would you accept that from me?
I'm eager, very anxious and excited to get to that topic, because
let me answer for you.
You can't answer for me. You will answer incorrectly. I have the answer. I don't want to give it now, because I want to give it in the appropriate video. I'm going to divide these conversations up. This one is on Surah 7. The next one, you can ask me that same question again. I'll provide the same answer, which is not the answer you're expecting. Okay? So let's wait.
Answer for you.
Let's wait till we get. Okay, you answer incorrectly for me then.
Yes. What's going to happen when I produce my evidence and it's not specifically explicitly written in there? You are going to laugh me off of here. You're going to say you're just spinning your own interpretation, imposing your own understanding of the Quran, making it read according to the science, and this is all just a big hoodwinkle, something like that. So your bottom line is you won't accept that from me. That's for sure. I can guarantee it. So yes, I will answer for you because I've had discussions with atheists. Been doing this for 20 years. Nobody would ever expect that mumbo jumbo from me. So my advice, and it is, you're just.
So what you're
Yeah.
admitting now is that you don't actually have irrefutable evidence?
No, I'm saying if I were to do that to you, okay, if I were to present to you, not that it's explicitly written in there, but it's just implied, you will not accept that
Okay.
from me, and I'm not
So
going to
I don't
accept
want to
that
be
from
forced.
you.
I don't want to be
Okay.
forced, prematurely into this conversation. I want everything to
Okay.
stay in context. This video on Surah 7 is going to be divided, uploaded separate from the other conversation we're going to have immediately after. Okay.
Okay.
So I want to have the discussion on the scientific errors in the Quran will be after this. We'll have that discussion when we're done with this one. All right. So, Bogey, what was
Yes.
the next item we needed to cover?
750. The people of the fire ask for water, and they're not given it by the people of the heavens because Allah said you shouldn't be given them. End of human compassion in heaven. Not nice, really.
Yeah. Well, Christianity has the same thing where.
Yeah, I know, but this is not Christianity we're talking about.
Yeah, I know, but it's the same sort of philosophy that somehow the Christians are all going to point and laugh when their loved ones are in the hellfire. Yeah, as if you could even have a heaven, knowing that hell is going on.
Yeah.
Right,
the difference is if I ever gone to heaven and somebody from hell asked me for a cup of water, I would give him a cup of water. Especially if I had infinite amount of water.
Well, if you had a personal God, I'd be pleading with him. Why are you letting this injustice go on? Why don't you fix this problem you created? That would be the bigger issue.
Yeah, we would be protesting in heaven. Give them water. They're thirsty.
Yeah.
Like, how bad could they have been in their entire life to put them in hell forever?
That was of course my problem when I the first time I ever tried to tackle religion. I was 12 years old. I tried to read the Bible. I was told that it was the word of God and all of that. And very soon, not even out of Genesis yet, I'd already thrown it across the room in disgust, because that was clearly not the word of a superior being, not a supreme being, not a superior being. This were the words of very inferior beings. And I remember, praying to God the way that would explain in Matthew that you don't do it out in public, that you do it in the privacy of your own room and all this. And I remember praying out loud that, that God had to explain himself, why he's responsible for all this evil and atrocity that is explained to him in the holy books or attributed to him. And that he needed to explain either that the holy books got him wrong, which it turns out to be the case, of course, or if he actually is responsible for all that, then he has to justify himself, and that if he would do neither, then he could not have my soul. I actually said at 12 years old, believing at the time that there was still a God, and believing at the time that there was still a hell. Hell was the first thing I let go of, but I hadn't done it yet. I realized I was damning my soul to hell by saying that, because why would I want to spend eternity kissing the ass of an amoral monster? There's just
which atrocity you were mentioning, atrocities in the Bible? Which one were you referring to?
Pick one.
Like, right, because it teaches to kill all.
The very existence of hell for unbelievers is enough immorality right there. I mean, you don't need to go any further. I mean, flooding the world, the way the Bible describes, is another stupid atrocity. And another one is the whole thing with Lot. I mean, why is it that everybody that God thinks is the one most righteous person is a drunk molesting his own kids? What the hell with that,
So if you read the Quran about the story in Lot, the whole part about him molesting his own children, where there was no punishment for that, and even some Christians have even mimicked that behavior, like a guy named Papa Pilgrim, justifying it with a Bible. That's actually not found in the Quran. Okay. So this is also another correction to the story of Lot.
Hell's all over the place.
Lot molested his children is in the Quran.
What?
There are plenty of examples in the Quran of what happens to LGBTQ people according to Allah.
This is a different issue.
I don't think at that point there is a necessity for a specific verse in the Quran.
Okay, we're talking about Lot molesting his daughters.
I don't think there is a specific verse in the Quran necessary to to say you have to cut their heads and their fingertips. That's not necessary after a few of these verses. Now let's go to the next one here. 780, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, aka Lot's people, aka LGBTQ people. What does verse 80 say?
Verse 780.
Yes.
And we said to and we have sent Lot, and when he said to his people, do you commit such immorality as no one has preceded you with from amongst the worlds?
Yes.
So this is talking about, okay, so now once again, this goes back to where you need to take a step back and you need to understand, okay, we know the Judeo-Christian, the big mistake which people make is they understanding Judeo-Christianity where all LGBT people were born in hell for the rest of eternity. This is what they believe. This is something which is taught in the Bible, but now Islam comes very different. There are differences.
This is what it says, and it says, you done something nobody else has ever done before. That's what it actually what it says, and I don't think we disagree on that. That's what verse 80 says.
As I said in the beginning of the show,
so, which is a scientific error in the Quran, because gay people existed since the beginning of time. We kind of know that, okay? Lots of people didn't invent this.
Yeah.
They didn't start practicing it at that point in time, and there's still gay people today. And you know what? That's just incorrect, and it's wrong.
Yeah. So this is kind of what I was complaining a little bit about in the beginning of the show, where in the last show I tried to talk about Adam, and I really never even got a chance to explain what we believed about Adam. Or it wasn't 30 seconds, I think, and I had 3 people jumping on me telling me I'm wrong, and I was like, you know what? I can't talk to these. So what my point here is, sometimes there come to a point when I say, okay, listen, there has to come to a point in this discussion where you got to kind of say, okay, let me listen and understand what the whole position is here. Then it's okay to attack. It's okay to criticize, but you first got to understand what it is. Not that you first attack, and then the guy's correcting you. No, you got that wrong. You got this wrong here. There's no global flood over here. No, Adam was not the the first man. That's not the way. This is not. You got to be more open-minded than that. Okay, so let's first talk about what the LGBT position is. Okay.
Okay. So
then we can attack.
I know you believe everything in the Quran, but
yes.
Do you genuinely hold it true that there were no gay people before this?
What do you mean by that?
Before Lot's people, according to the Quran, there were no people doing gay stuff ever, anywhere. That's Allah. He said it right here. He shut his mouth off, and he said there were nothing like this before.
So this is something I couldn't prove or disprove. There's no way you can prove or disprove this.
So you don't believe this verse?
We don't talk about proof. I mean, there's no point. If
you can't go to the stories and say, I can prove this, I can disprove this.
Do you believe?
But the question now comes down to, is it genetic?
Okay.
You see,
yes.
If homosexuality is a genetic mutation, let's just say,
not a week ago, I think at least it made the news about a week ago, that was talking about that there's a suite of genes. It's not a gay gene, but at least this one study said that there was a suite of genes involved.
So the question is, when did it originate from a mutation, and when did that mutation enter into the gene pool?
It's common throughout mammals.
Yeah, it doesn't prove about the origin about Boraz's question. I mean, what I'm getting to the point here, we can't prove or disprove these type of questions you're asking.
Okay, well,
and so this is all just an argument from silence.
Right. We're not proving. We're showing evidence for a conclusion.
There is a statement.
You're raising questions. That's not evidence.
There's a very clear statement
that when you present a fact that aligns with, that positively indicates one position or eliminates or excludes another, right? That's what evidence is. So when I present the evidence, as I did for Adam, or excuse me, for the devil character in the previous stories about Lucifer and everything, the fact that we still call him Lucifer and so forth, this is all evidence that Satan, this character, this devil character, was invented out of earlier mythology. I have other evidence I can show for that, again, from this very surah.
Well, you're
Right, where
presenting
it talks about,
anecdotal evidence. This is a
it's not
collected and
anecdotal.
casual,
It has
informal
nothing to
manner,
do with my
relying
personal
heavily
experience.
on.
It has absolutely
Well,
nothing to do with my personal experience. And it's not anecdotal evidence either. I mean,
Yeah.
like in the Bible, for example, and of course it's not going to matter for you because you're not into the Bible so
Mhm.
much. But in the Bible, it describes the serpent, which is never said to be Satan, ever. It's not described, and not, it doesn't say that in Revelations 9 either, or anywhere else in the Revelations. It does not say that the serpent in the garden is Satan. What it does say
Mhm.
is that the serpent was supposed to be the ancestor of all snakes, is then cursed to crawl on his belly for all of the rest of his days.
Mhm.
Then in another story, chronologically following that, the first time that we hear that Satan is mentioned is in the book of Job, and the first thing it says about Satan is that he's walking. And Satan and God are on good terms. They never even had a falling out. So that is a fact that is in evidence of the fact that we did not have Satan as the character in the garden. Could not have been. Even the scripture doesn't allow that. When people point to Revelation saying, well, it says that, Satan is that old serpent. Yeah, it's that old serpent with like 7 heads standing on the beach when you can't stand when you have no legs. So it doesn't work. Satan was not the serpent. The serpent was originally adapted from the character in the Epic of Gilgamesh with Lilith and the serpent who could not be tamed. That's where that character came from. And then it was reappropriated mistakenly by Christians and Jews that it was supposed to be, or at least Christians, that it was supposed to be the devil. And then the Muslims simply copped to it. They just repeat the same error and then changed his name to Iblis and built on some other mythology and turned him into a genie.
Okay. Well,
that's
an
what
assertion. No, that's not evidence. But anyways,
you can show evidence of something else.
I think
but I don't think you have that.
Okay, I think there is a more productive use of our time would be not trying to prove or disprove whether Islam just borrowed a mythology that was handed down from generation to generation from Christianity.
But you can't argue that I didn't present evidence. I didn't say irrefutable evidence. Well, I don't know that anybody can refute it, but I'm not making that assertion. Sure. I did present evidence, and you can't say that I didn't.
I just feel like there's no way we're really going to go anywhere trying to take the stories, whether it's a devil or whether it's anything else. I think I can really, as you said, I think what you're doing, you're casting doubt upon it. Maybe this is the reason why we should doubt it. If that's all you're doing,
there's not a reason to believe it. That's
there is.
No, there is.
No, again, you keep going back to that.
No.
We do have scientific evidence. Which
no, you don't. But we're going to get to that after we get done with Surah 7. We've got quite a list. I'm expecting to do a video series listing the scientific errors in the Quran. There's no way we could do it all in one episode. It's going to be at minimum 3 or 4.
I bet you're not going to make it past the first.
What's that?
I don't think you'll make it past the first.
Yeah, I don't think you'll make it past the first either. I expect you to drop out before the first one's done. But anyway,
we're all going to be Muslims
we're going to get
before the end of the first. Okay, shall we go on to the next couple of ones? Okay, 784, he said he killed the gay people with rain. 784, if you want to check it.
Mm-hmm.
And this obviously contradicts another verse later on where it says he flipped the town upside down on them. These kind of contradictions are, I think, the driving reason behind Muslims not agreeing how to kill gays. They just can't figure it out because God just contradicted himself so many times.
Okay, no, we don't kill gays. Okay.
No, you don't.
Throw them
the
off.
Iranians do, the Saudis do, the Egyptians put them in jail forever. The Sultan of Brunei was going to execute gays, and he kind of stopped when everybody was shouting at him. The only countries in the world that has severe punishment for LGBT people is Islamic countries.
Yeah,
uniquely.
I've seen plenty of videos of gay people being thrown off of buildings in Sharia countries for being gay.
I'm so happy to see that you guys brought me on the show to explain the position of homosexuality in Islam. You guys have already been educated on this. Why did you invite me?
because
You
we
guys
want
know
to
it all, right?
because we want to know what's your opinion on this.
Well, now you do. Now you do. It looks like you guys have already made up your mind.
No, but it
And
is.
yeah, yeah.
This is what we
okay,
know.
let's be fair. I've studied this for many years. I have made up my mind. Does that mean that I'm not going to admit when I'm wrong? No, absolutely. That will never happen. A faith believer will never admit when they're wrong. That's they
Right,
can't.
right.
They just can't. So I don't expect you to do that, but I can.
Mhm.
So if you can show
Can
me that
I
I'm wrong,
tell you what we believe about homosexuality and all that?
what's that?
Can I share with you what we believe about homosexuals and all the stuff you've been rattling about? Would you like to hear it?
Of course.
That's why you're
Okay.
here.
Okay, well, seems like you guys have already made up your mind about all this. And there's a tremendous amount of propaganda out there, and most of it is actually being fed to you by the right-wing Christians and really hate mongers. Well,
None
the
of
first
that is
thing
true.
is,
Not a word of it. So
yes, if you go to Fox News, which is a Christian ministry, if
and
you
I don't go to
to
Fox News, and I didn't get any.
they do
Absolutely
pump
any.
out a lot of propaganda
I
against
didn't
Islam.
get any one word of
Mhm.
my perspective from any news source.
Yeah. So here's the differences. Here, first of all, the thing is, you people kill gays. That's a baloney. First of all, this is whatever you see in Islamic Sharia law, whether it's a punishment or whatever it may be. This is not for me. This is not for the 1 billion Muslim people to be implementing. This is called vigilantism. Okay, we are not. Islam is not a vigilante religion where people can take the law in their own hands and start implementing. It's like this: if you see someone create a traffic violation, you cannot go and say, hey, give me $150 because that's what the punishment for this traffic violation is. This is, you're taking the law in your own hands. So for us today, for the Muslims, the 1 billion Muslims, we are not ordered to kill homosexuals, okay? In Islamic law, you will find an ordinance for sodomy, which is like that. But we do not implement that. That is only for the Khalifa, which is known as the leader of the Muslims, and which he then delegates to his deputants. That's the first misunderstanding. Second misunderstanding is the homosexuality in Islam, as far as the punishment is concerned and the strict condemnation, is only referring to male homosexuality. Islam QA actually has an article on this. If you just type Islam QA lesbianism, suhak, I believe is the Arabic word. There really is no punishment for lesbianism inside Islam. So the article said it's just got to be delegated to the wazir or whoever the leader, because we don't find anything on that. So that's 50% of the problem fixed right there. So as you can see, there's differences between Islam and Christianity. And the third correction is, in the Bible, it talks about, you're going to go to hell if you commit sodomy. And I've had many friends who are gay, and I've seen them cry over this because their parents are Christian. Committing sodomy and being a homosexual doesn't condemn you to hell. It might condemn you to hell for a little bit. It might for a limited period of time. But the major sins, whether it's homosexuality, whether it's whatever it may be, that does not condemn a person to hell. There was a group of people in Islam who did believe in something like that. They were called the Khawarij. So can a person be homosexual and Muslim so long as he accepts and understands what he's doing is wrong? And repents, like we all should be doing, then yes, it's very possible he could go to heaven.
So somebody
there are
can be homosexual as long as they accept that homosexuality is wrong.
And they repent and they pray and believe.
Which
they can
obviously
go to heaven.
Can't happen. It's a sexual orientation.
I have gay friends. I have
But
many. There are a lot of homosexuals.
You can't just turn off your sexual orientation. That doesn't work. That's not real.
It never works.
Well, now I actually have relatives.
So these people can be gay and Muslim as long as they hate themselves.
Well, no, I have a relative who's gay.
Okay.
And how I knew that, because when we were growing up, we would all be playing around. He was interested in the guys, and he had really not any interest in girls.
Okay, so
let me just give you his example.
The corrections that you made turned out not to be corrections at all. Your final statement meant that I was originally correct in what I said. So you can be gay and Muslim as long as you accept that you're wrong. Yes. That's the statement Islam makes that is wrong.
Well, there were the big I think it was Boraz's comment that, and this is that we just go out and kill homosexuals. No, we do not take the law in our own hands as far as the Muslim. This is called vigilantism. That was part which I had to correct. Secondly, we got to make the differentiation between lesbianism
that wasn't
and
a position that I actually held. I mean, I will say
I'll
that
correct you.
okay, but I get the same thing from Christians too, because there are some that argue that Christianity is not prohibited in the Bible. I can show them exactly where it says that, but then they'll do as
You mean
usual. They'll
homosexuality?
try to find some way of saying, well, it doesn't really mean what it says.
Well, let me give you an article from this, if you like, from the Scholars, which they talk about this.
Just a small
So you can
point.
learn more about it.
No. Just a small point with the when Islam is the law of the land, gay men will be executed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, regardless of whether an individual Muslim might say, well, it's not my job to execute them, but I'm perfectly okay if the government does it for me. Okay, so it actually shows in the map very well, but the execution of Islamic edicts and laws generally falls in the hands of the ruler. We agree on that. The ruler gets his power from the power of the majority of the country. So if a country has a majority Muslim population, they will have a ruler that will go ahead and execute gays because that's what the majority wants. The point I'm trying to make, this is morally and ethically wrong, regardless of how well it's documented otherwise.
If we have a majority Christian country where people, believed and adhered to the Bible, like, for example, evangelical Christians, if we had a majority of them, then you and I wouldn't be having this discussion. We'd all be imprisoned because 49%.
Just a second here.
Hold on, don't cut me off,
just a second here for that point.
No, I didn't cut you off.
You live in the United States.
Yeah.
The United States is a majority evangelical country, and we're talking about
majority
this.
evangelical, majority Christian. You can
say
say
majority Christian for
if
sure.
you combine Protestants and Catholics together, you get majority.
They're a majority. You're sitting in that country. You're not a Christian, and we're talking about this, and none of us are getting executed.
And there's a good reason for that. And here's the reason why. Bureau of Firearms and Tobacco, the FBI, and other law enforcement agencies, they they actually have a program where they went through every mosque in America, and they trained them on how to handle these right-wing Christian groups like the Two Percenters and the Michigan Militias and other Christian terrorist organizations in this country who have their bullseye on us. And they trained us on how to handle them. And would there be a shooter on site or whatever? First of all, let me correct you one thing. The big hoodwinkle of your Christian propaganda, which I think you guys have sort of been influenced by, without interrupting me, because I don't interrupt you guys, okay, is you think that somehow Christians are more peaceful than Muslims. No, they're not. What you see is a hoodwinkle. It's an appearance of it. And here's the reason why. I can give you a statistic, if you would, where it shows 49% of evangelical Christians said if they had the ability, they would outlaw Islam as a religion on this earth. What you see in America is the following. As I mentioned, the Bureau of Firearms and Tobacco and other people who are busting up their terrorist organizations. Like, for example, I can cite you several examples of Christians mounting terrorist attacks, even at the level of September 11th. To attack mosques all over this country. You can Google mosque burnings in America. You could see mosques being burned all over this country. But the real reason why you don't see a huge outbreak of Christian terrorism is because of law enforcement and because of litigation. For example, and I think it was in New Jersey, $2 million lawsuit they were hit with for denying a mosque to be built all over the country. Christians, organizations like the Family Foundation in Tampa, elsewhere, are trying to prevent mosques from being built, and they're being sued. Murfreesboro, Tennessee, another example, where the government had to go after them, and they told them, hey, listen, you guys can have your meetings. They had a town hall meeting of whether we should forbid a mosque from being built in this country. And the federal government came after them and said, you guys can have your meeting, that's fine, but if you guys decide in that meeting not to build a mosque, we're going to come after you with huge $1 million lawsuits. That's when the Christians back off. Oh, whoa. We cannot. Our born again Christian organizations are going to go bankrupt trying to prevent mosques from being built. And this conflict is happening in almost every major city. And in every major city, they have been fought and defeated by the federal government. we are enjoying religious freedom, and probably you atheists too, not because of the tolerance and love and compassion of Christians, though there are many Christians like that, but because of law enforcement, because of vigorous training. Muslims have been trained in the mosques. You go to a mosque today and you walk in there, look at the level of security we have. Uh, um, we have people on plainclothes officers with guns preventing Christians from coming in there and shooting up the place. We have monitoring, which was all set up and trained by the government. So this idea that Christians are the most peaceful and we're the violent ones, this is their propaganda. The truth of the matter is they have bad apples. We have bad apples. They're no more peaceful than us.
I just want to clarify that everything you corrected me on was stuff I already agreed with you on. That was not a position that I ever held. Okay, I do not think that Christians are, oh so nice and everything. I mean, how could I? I'm an atheist.
Neither do I, by the way.
They ran the world for a good bit of history, and being atheist would get you killed in a Christian-dominated country centuries ago, and not that many centuries ago. So Christianity is still the bloodiest religion in all history, and it is still guilty of far more than Islam is, believe it or not. For all those Christians listening who want to say that the Muslims are the bad ones, and I know that Christians will say that they're the goody two shoes and all of that. But then you have to look at like every mass shooter situation, virtually all of them that we've had in the last couple of years have been right-wing extremist Christians. Not absolutely all of them, because there are a couple of exceptions, but by far most of them have been right-wing Christians. And I don't think any of them, at least in the last couple of years, there hadn't been a left-winger in that group, right? And I think the last atheist that involved in a shooting like that was years ago. So yeah, we know it tends to be the Christians. And here in my town, where I live, a suburb of Dallas, there was a mosque over here that was announcing that they were having some speaker come in. There was somehow the announcement of this speaker's presence got leaked into Christian circles, and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of right wingers showing up with their AR-15s demonstrating their rights. And I know how people are. I'm in Texas. We're surrounded by this. So anytime you come up with a conflicting idea, you're going to get a whole bunch of Christians showing up with their machine guns to show you their patriotism. So you and I are on the same page on some aspects.
We should all be very thankful that we live in America and we have the United States Constitution to protect your rights and my rights.
I might have told you before, exactly. but if in case you weren't part of that conversation, earlier in this series, I mentioned that I had dinner with the president of the American Dawah Foundation, I think it was. He and I were having dinner, and I said, look, I will adamantly oppose you on the positions that we disagree on, theology and everything, but where we have a common enemy in our current administration and a common bond and a common defense, which is the First Amendment. I said, count on me to come to your aid in any First Amendment defense, because that's what atheists are all about, is the First Amendment. Not so much on the second. That's not such a big deal. Yeah, and to me, that's not the issue. The Second Amendment is not even a thing that I argue about. I just stay completely out of that one. But the First Amendment is what I'm all about.
Look, Nadir, it's a sad state of affairs that the Christian right-wingers are behaving the way they are. It does not. This is not okay. And I can't find any atheists around me who would say this is okay. Okay? So just in case you are having your paintbrush with you and you want to paint the atheists with the same color that you paint the Christian right-wingers with, no, that's not the case. But we will debate you on religion 24/7, 365.
Okay, let's move on to the next point, please.
Let's move on to the next one, 791. Just a second, just 785. Sorry about that. 785, a geographical reference. It mentions Median people, and I kind of dug it up, and it looks like it's a place between Al-Hijaz and Al-Sham, which is Syria. Close to the land of Ma'an, their land was known by the name of their tribe and was thus called Median. I try to put these geographical references on the map if I can, just for the study, so that we know where things are. Okay, 791. 791. What does it say? Oh, so he took them with a sheikh, Rejfa? And I have a problem with the Rejfa. Is this earthquake or is this a high fever that makes people shake? I'm not sure because they all ended up face down in their buildings, in their homes. So I'm not sure here, but these are things that might be missing from the translation.
You can speak Arabic, Boraz?
A little bit.
Okay, very good.
Okay. 798, this is likely to be Sumer, which is al-Qura, otherwise, which is Mesopotamia, which is Iraq, if you want to put it on the map. Another geographic reference, just for the reference. In many places, magician, 109. Let me see 109. 108, 109. Oh, so basically in 109, many places magicians and sorcerers are used interchangeably. So Aron has this question in his study that, is it magician? Is it the sorcerer? What is it? And I don't think the Quran actually makes a big distinction between the two. You do sleight of hand, magician or sorcerer, like, but do you have your input on it if you want? We do make a distinction today, but I don't think in the past it was making any difference.
Yeah, I don't make a distinction.
Okay. So you had a question about the Moses trick is to throw his stick and then the stick turns into a snake, that's his big trick, right?
The only reason I commented on that was because, I mean, I frequently have arguments with Christians who want to say that what they believe in is not magic, but the Quran is quite explicit about it. That Moses is a sorcerer or a magician or whatever, and then they're okay with that. I mean, if anything that is supernatural is essentially magical, that they're the same thing. So I don't understand why people get upset about using the word magic. It's the same thing. It's the evocation of supernatural forces to control or forecast natural events. That's the way both magic and miracle are essentially defined.
Yep. Yeah, so the story is when the sorcerers so Pharaoh invites the sorcerers to counter the sorcery of Moses, right? So when the sorcerers come in and they say, yeah, we got a reward, blah, blah, and they throw their sticks in after they throw their sticks in first. Obviously, all the sticks turn into snakes because guess what? They're sorcerers, right? So the trick works, and now we have a room full of snakes, and everybody's running scared. And then Moses kind of has a quick consultation with Allah, and then he throws his stick in, and his stick turns into a snake and eats the other snakes. And that's obviously a bigger trick. So
now what surprises me is that anybody, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, that anybody believes that event literally happened as described.
Interesting question. Do you?
I don't see any reason why I shouldn't. Of course.
Well, yeah. I can't see a reason why you should, which is already a reason why you shouldn't. But okay, the difference of opinion there.
Okay. Obviously, the other trick that Moses did was his hand being glowing, I guess.
Yeah, that was something that I was not familiar with. I had to go look up. What does it mean when Moses's hand is white? Because we don't have that in any of the traditions I was raised with.
Right.
I mean, the language doesn't help a lot. So I was going like, what? His hands is lit, or is it just white?
This was one of the many signs which God gave to Moses to present to Pharaoh.
Yeah, but what is the sign? What is the sign? Is his hand is like a light bulb now?
Well, this, of course, this is showing something supernatural, kind of a miraculous sign for Moses. I'm sorry, for Pharaoh and the people over there to see, hey, listen, I am a true messenger. And because this goes back to the point where God just doesn't send messengers without any clear evidences or proof or signs. Say, hey, you just better believe, or else, well, you're all going to be killed very soon. No, there's evidences, there's proofs which are laid out for them to see. And if they reject, then they will be judged.
Again, the whole problem is you have to believe. We give insufficient evidence. We're gonna perform the same trick that your sorcerers can already do, or we're gonna blame a volcanic eruption or whatever, and you better believe the hokey story we're telling, or else you're going to be punished to the fate worse than death after you die. That's also incredibly empty. I mean, look what a god could actually do if there was actually a god. We wouldn't have, none of this would be. There wouldn't be any conflict between Judaism and Christianity and Islam, and they wouldn't any of them be talking about the flood story, because that wouldn't have happened at all, and it wouldn't be relevant to anything. And we would all be able to see that there is a God. We would all be able to know in our hearts that there is a God. We'd all be able to demonstrate that. Miracles would actually happen in a reliable way. There would be faith healers working in hospitals. Miracles would be something that you could perform the same way that Gandalf or Obi-Wan or Spock can do, or Hermione.
Yes. This was actually an objection of the pagans at that time, where they said, "Why wouldn't you? Why didn't you just send out Muhammad with two angels, kind of on his side, coming down with a book? Something that there seems to be an easier way to go about showing that you are right." Was their argument. So this is not an old, this is not a new argument you're raising, Aaron. This is one which is even addressed and mentioned in the Quran, and the Quran responds to that argument that even if we were to do that, it still would not make a difference. Those who want to disbelieve after seeing the evidence as presented in the Quran, they're still going to disbelieve, even if we were to the sky were to just be ripped open and big miraculous signs like that.
Right. If God were to present himself,
so the Quran addresses it.
Right. So instead of sending a prophet, the Quran, you're telling me that the Quran admits that instead of sending the prophet, they should have just had God announce himself, because God can announce himself to absolutely every single person, not just at the same time, but at all times. And there's no need. If a God really existed, there would be no need for a prophet or any number of prophets. We could all be prophets. We would all be able to know.
Yes.
Right? God would be able to express this in verifiable ways, like I just described.
The evidence which we have today, if they don't believe in that, and if they still walk away and they still don't believe in that, then it doesn't matter. God could come down, can do these amazing miracles like how I just explained to you. They still will not believe.
And that's not really existed, whether we believe or not.
That's not true.
If God really existed, then whether we believe or not wouldn't be an issue.
Well, this goes back to chapter 6, verse, which we talked about last time. I think 6, verse 124, where the disbelievers said, well, it's your fault why we disbelieve, because you could have snapped your fingers and made us all believers. But then the Quran denied that argument as well. Said, nope, you don't know how this thing works. So there is an era of unknown as far as how and why, what is God's plan, and why did he do it this particular way?
Yeah, it's always the word of the prophet justifying whatever he wants to sell us. And that's why all these different prophets for different religions tell different stories. Because as you said in Surah 16, you have all these different prophets showing up, but they're telling completely different stories that are begetting different religions, and they don't have any common bond to them, because it always ends up being that guy who's pretending to speak for God.
All the prophets came with the same message, but it was man who then later changed and altered that religion to, maybe they adopted something from some pagan source or something like that. So all the messengers came with the same message.
Baha'u'llah and Joseph Smith and Muhammad and Guru Nanak and Krishna all came with completely different messages. No common
There are
bond
many.
at all.
It is true. It is true. There are many false prophets,
and there are no true prophets.
Well, that's your assertion. But
there isn't. But this is where we get back into there's no truth to the thing. But that I think is going to get into the next episode again. So let's see if we can get through this one.
Yay! So we have Moses performing miracles, obviously, that are indistinguishable from magic, fooled everyone, including the pharaohs and their magicians. Everybody thought it was magic, and yet it was a miracle. Right?
Actually, yeah. So the magicians of Moses, when they saw Moses's miracle, they actually accepted this was not some kind of magic, and they actually fell on their face,
Yes.
and then they accepted the God of Moses.
Yes.
So yeah,
After the fact. After the
once
fact.
they saw the miracles, correct.
Right. Okay. So next. 71133, it lists the what do you call it?
Hey, Perez, I think your mom wants you.
No, that's my parrot.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it lists the plagues that infested Egypt, and I don't know if the lice part is part of the biblical account or not. I'm not too sure about the lice. But it says floods, locust, lice, frogs, which is definitely part of the, and then the blood, which is the river Nile turning red, which turned out to be something preternatural. And these are the floods that are being mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So, and before that, there was a bit of drought. So it's just a bit of detail to what it actually lists as you know, as the elements of what struck the Egyptians. 7136 drowned the Pharaoh and his army in the water. I will just take it as, okay, we're going to just reference this and move on. A detailed account of how the Pharaoh was drowned in the water comes later in the Quran. So this is just a taster, if you like. There is no mention here of Moses parting the sea or the water or anything else. This is just a small account of it. Yeah.
It's mentioned in other places in the
Yeah.
Quran.
That's what I'm saying. There is more detail to come for this later on. So this is just a brief story of Moses and Pharaoh. On 74, do you remember those guys running around over an active fault line? We're talking the African trench here.
Did you say 174?
143, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Do you remember those guys are running around over an active fault, like with earthquakes and apparently some nice volcanoes? Of course, nearby volcanic eruption would knock Moses out with this shockwave, because volcanic eruptions tend to be really loud and it would knock people out. This is the account of Moses getting the tablets the first time around and asks God to see him, like he would be able to see Allah. And Allah says, no, you can't look at me, but I'll descend upon this mountain, and then you would see what happens to the mountain when I descend upon it. The mountain turns into dust, aka explodes, and Moses is said to have not been knocked out. Well, I'm going like it's probably knocked out because of the shockwave. This was a volcano. The entire Sinai Peninsula is part of the American Trench. Geological activity is ripe. Aaron, you're muted. Your mic is muted.
I don't think they ever identified what volcano was responsible for
No.
the Pentateuch.
No.
So, yeah, I was reading somewhere that there are some who say that it wasn't in Egypt at all, that the Exodus that they were talking about, or that the volcanic event was somewhere like maybe in Babylon or something like that. But I don't think anybody's ever identified the Mount Sinai, the volcano involved.
Yeah, I'm not insinuating that. I'm just saying this looks like a volcano, and I have no idea where it is. I'm assuming it's somewhere around the Sinai Peninsula, because that's where Moses was getting lost at for 40 years.
Well, that's according to the story as we know it.
Yeah. According to the story as he's passed down. But like getting lost there for 40 years is kind of impossible, even in the middle of the Iron Age. But there you go. We can go into that later if we
Well,
want.
another problem is that the numbers don't mean anything.
No.
Whenever it's whenever the Bible says that there's 7 of this or 40 of that, we know that it's really symbolism of what the 7 means or what the 40 means, and so we've no idea what the true numbers are for anything.
Okay. Nadir, anything you want to add to this?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Let's just move through it.
So 7:145, the first set of the 10 Commandments. That's what being talked about, and then the golden calf, 148, and it even made noises, and that was a big deal. I find this story a little bit odd. Like Moses says, I'm going to go up to the mountain to talk to God, and I'm going to be right back. Be right back, right? The moment he leaves the village and goes to the mountain, his people immediately start building a calf. Makes no sense.
Yeah. There's lots of problems with that. I think more so in the Bible than what happened across in the Quran. I mean, I found lots of issues with the biblical story of this.
Yeah, but this is essentially the same story there, especially regarding the calf.
And from what I understand, I mean, the scholarship supposedly holds that there are at least 4 authors, not just for the entirety of the Pentateuch, but for Exodus itself.
Mm-hmm.
That just this part on the regarding the 10 Commandments is written by a number of different people, and that's why there's different versions of the 10 Commandments in this, and that's why it doesn't mention 10 Commandments or say the 10 Commandments until you get to the set in Exodus 34. The set in Exodus 20 is actually like 11 to 14 commandments right there in Exodus 20, and then the list continues on for the next 3 chapters after that.
Yeah.
So it's not 10 commandments at Exodus 20 like all the Christians make it out to be.
Okay.
Anything else you want to cover before we get to the science issue?
I
just need 1 minute here, guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
So in 166, are you agreeing with me here that it actually talks about the Jews becoming apes, and it's not a comparison?
So the verse, tremendous amount of propaganda on that, where they're spreading.
Yeah, but is it like, look at the verbiage here?
Yeah, so basically it said some of them were transformed into apes and monkeys. It didn't say all of them based on their behavior, but then again, we also see the same things about Muslims. It said that the people who were a group of Muslims, a very religious, devout group of Muslims called the Khawarij, they were transformed into dogs. They will be the Kilabun Nar, the dogs of the hellfire. So you also have the same thing with Muslims. So that's why it should not be taken as an attack against them.
I'm
personally.
not taking it as an attack.
Yeah.
I'm just making the point that this is not a comparison. He's not comparing some of those Jews to apes. He said they were apes.
Mm-hmm. They were turned into apes and monkeys.
Yeah. So this is not a comparison. This is actual turning into apes there.
Although to be completely technically correct, we are still apes and monkeys today.
Yeah. So this is not a big argument, but I'm just going into the linguistics here. It's going like, oh, he's not even comparing them to apes. He's calling they are apes, which is correct. Strangely enough, we're all apes.
Yeah. I apologize for the bird. I went to go pick him up if that's what he wanted, but I don't know what he wants. So he's just going to
bring him on the show.
I was going to, but he doesn't want to be picked up. And if he doesn't want to get picked up, I'll come back with 1 fewer fingers.
Yes. So 170, I think this might well be the first mention of prayer in Islam, because we're reading it in the chronological order. And this is the first mention of Salat.
What was Salat?
The Islamic prayer.
Okay.
Right. So this just comes up here as a word, and I'm going like, maybe the first time it's mentioned. Literally, there is no specification in the Quran as to how to pray, how many times to pray, which direction. everything that regards prayer comes from the hadith, except a few mentions that you have to pray, and that's it. I'm just trying to point that out. If you want the details of the prayer, it's not in the Quran. You have to go for the hadith for that. Okay, 173rd mention of prayer. 180, Allah has the best names, all 99 of them, until we find the 100th one. Just as a fine trivia. And as such, I think we're finished with Surah 7 here. Anything you want to say about it?
No, not at all.
No? Did we do it wrong? You think we did it wrong? I mean, you have to calculate into our take on it is that we don't think this is very true stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We look at it with a skeptical eye and say, oh, well, that's not true.
Well, this is why it was important to me to have somebody on who speaks Arabic, who was raised with the traditions, because I've noticed that nobody would pick up the Quran and read it from scratch and understand what it's saying. You have to be raised with some of the traditions in there. But I've had to have an awful lot of stuff explained to me. And likewise, if I had been raised in Pakistan, for example, and I picked up a Bible for the first time ever after moving to the United States and read that, there would be no way that I would be able to deduce that the serpent in the garden was supposed to be Satan, for example. You have to be told that this is the interpretation by tradition, and that's why you believe it that way. So